Mike Tyson. In the late 1980s, Mike Tyson wasn't just a boxer. He was destruction incarnate. The youngest heavyweight champion in history, Tyson fought like a predator, stalking opponents with speed and raw, terrifying power. Promoters didn't just market him, they warned people about him. He was the knockout king, the baddest man on the planet. But outside the ring, the cracks were showing. His rage didn't switch off, and behind the fame, Tyson was unraveling fast. Then, in 1991, it all fell apart. Tyson was arrested for the rape of 18-year-old Desiree Washington, a beauty pageant contestant for Miss Black America. He was convicted in 1992 and sentenced to 6 years in prison, serving less than 3. The world was stunned as the icon of toughness was now a convicted rapist. But the red flags had been flying for years. Bar brawls, threats, assaults, and unchecked aggression. Tyson himself later admitted to fighting while high on drugs and using a fake penis to avoid detection, spiraling in addiction, and living on the edge of chaos. Tyson was released in 1995, returning to the ring after prison like nothing happened, as he had multiple comeback fights. Many thought the controversy was over, but in 1997, he bit Evander Holyfield's ear during their fight, and he continued to stay volatile. The sport still wanted him, but the man was lost. Mike Tyson didn't just burn out. He became a symbol of uncontained fury of how boxing can build monsters, then act surprised when they explode. But Tyson wasn't the only champion whose fists reached beyond the ring. Floyd Mayweather Jr. In the 2000s, Floyd Mayweather Jr. wasn't just undefeated, he was untouchable. A defensive genius with reflexes that defied logic, he turned boxing into a game of inches and millions. Promoters called him Money Mayweather, a walking empire. He doesn't knock you out, he makes you miss, then makes you pay. But outside the ring, another pattern was emerging, and it was one he couldn't slip. And in 2010, the image cracked. Mayweather was arrested after brutally assaulting Josie Harris, the mother of 3 of his children, right in front of them. He threatened her, punched her repeatedly, and stole her phone to hide the evidence. In 2012, he was sentenced to 90 days in jail, serving 60. The public reaction was conflicted. Some defended him while others wondered how long the sport would keep looking away. But this wasn't the first time. Mayweather had already faced multiple domestic violence allegations going back to 2001. Accusations from multiple women, often settled quietly. The system, courts, promoters, and fans kept letting him fight. He never missed a step in the ring. But outside it, the charges kept mounting. Battery, defamation, even lawsuits tied to his temper and control. What began as a perfect record became a twisted mirror reflecting the cost of greatness without accountability. Mayweather didn't fall, he rose higher than ever. But the darkness was always in the shadow of the spotlight. Carlos Monzon. In the 1970s, Carlos Monzon was more than Argentina's champion. He was a national obsession. Tall, cold, and impossibly composed, Monzon defended his middleweight title 14 times. To his countrymen, he was invincible. He fought with machine-like precision and carried himself like a god. But behind closed doors, he was a man coming apart, and no one wanted to see it. Then in 1988, everything shattered. Monzon threw his partner, Alicia Muniz, a Uruguayan model and mother of his son, from a second-story balcony after a violent argument. She died instantly. He had choked her first, then pushed her to her death. He was convicted of her murder and sentenced to 11 years in prison. Argentina was stunned. Their icon was now a murderer. But the warning signs had long been ignored. Monzon had a long history of domestic abuse. Friends, coaches, and even journalists knew about his violence toward women. But he kept winning, and the winning made people look away. While on prison furlough in 1995, Monzon crashed his car and died. By then, the public had already rewritten his story, from hero to cautionary tale. Carlos Monzon wasn't just a boxer who snapped. He was a slow-motion tragedy, fueled by fame, rage, and a country's refusal to confront the truth. Edwin Valero. In the late 2000s, Edwin Valero was a storm in gloves. Dominant, undefeated, and untouched. Every one of his 27 wins came by knockout, most in the first round. Fans called him El Inca, and to Venezuelans, he was a national warrior, a force of destruction with a wild stare and a violent rhythm. But outside the ring, the destruction never stopped. Then, in 2010, the nightmare reached its peak. Valero was arrested for the murder of his wife, Jennifer Vieira. He had stabbed her in a hotel room. The next day, he was found hanged in his jail cell. The boxing world recoiled, but it shouldn't have been surprising. For years, Valero's violence had been documented. Beatings, threats, hospital visits. He had once crashed a motorcycle and was banned from fighting in the US due to a brain injury. And yet, promoters kept finding places for him to fight. Even when he was arrested for assaulting his wife weeks before her murder, police released him without charge. He never got help and he never slowed down. Instead, he took his fury from the ring and turned it inward into his home, his family, and ultimately, himself. Edwin Valero's legacy isn't just about knockouts. It's a chilling reminder of what happens when violence becomes an identity. Sonny Liston. In the 1960s, Sonny Liston wasn't just feared. He was terror in human form. A heavyweight with tree trunk arms and dead eyes, he bullied champions and silenced crowds. When he crushed Floyd Patterson in the first round to become world champion, many called him a monster in gloves. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just stared. But behind that stare was a life drenched in crime and shadows. Long before fame, Liston had racked up over a dozen arrests for armed robbery, assaulting cops, and extortion. He learned to box in prison, but even as a champion, he never left that world behind. The mob managed his career, and rumors swirled that he threw the alley fight under mob pressure. Then, in 1970, Liston was found dead in his Las Vegas home. The official cause was a heroin overdose, despite him being terrified of needles. No forced entry, no suspects, just silence. Police never investigated deeply. Just another addict, they said. Case closed. To this day, his death remains one of boxing's most unsettling mysteries. Sonny Liston never escaped his past. He wore it like gloves. Tight, hidden, lethal. And when he died, he took the truth with him. Tony Ayala Jr. In the early 1980s, Tony Ayala Jr. was the future. A teenage prodigy with terrifying power, he tore through opponents like they were made of paper. Promoters whispered that he was the next Roberto Duran, only meaner. He fought like he had something to prove and something to hide. But outside the ring, his demons weren't waiting. They were already in control. And in 1983, it all collapsed. At just 19, Ayala broke into a 30-year-old woman's home and raped her at knife point. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The boxing world was stunned as a rising star was gone overnight. But the warning signs were already there. He'd been charged with assaulting women before. He had a history of drug abuse and violence. Coaches called him uncontrollable, but kept pushing him into the spotlight. Paroled in 1999 after serving 16 years, he returned to boxing, but the rage hadn't left. More arrests followed. Drug possession, burglary, weapons charges. In 2015, he was found dead from a heroin overdose, alone and forgotten. Tony Ayala Jr. wasn't just a wasted talent. He was a case study in what happens when potential is protected more than people. He didn't lose his career, he threw it away, long before anyone could stop him. James Butler. In the early 2000s, James Butler was fighting for redemption. A rugged super middleweight with raw talent, he was known as the Harlem Hammer. He had the power and the presence, but there was always a flicker behind his eyes. Something unstable, something waiting to ignite. And in 2001, it did. Live on national TV after losing a fight to Richard Grant, Butler walked up during the post-fight handshake and sucker punched him with a bare fist. Grant collapsed, bleeding and concussed as the world watched in horror. But that was just the start. 3 years later, Butler was arrested for murdering sports writer Sam Kellerman, beating him to death with a hammer, then setting the apartment on fire. Kellerman had given him a place to stay, but Butler repaid him with murder. He was sentenced to 29 years in prison. And the world finally saw what some had long feared. Butler didn't just lose control, he had no control at all. Before the murder, there were signs: emotional instability, erratic behavior, outbursts in training. But like many, he slipped through the cracks until it was far too late. James Butler became something boxing rarely produces: a fighter turned killer, both in and out of the ring. Adonis Stevenson. In the 2010s, Adonis Stevenson was the comeback king. A late bloomer who blasted his way to the light heavyweight title with a one-punch knockout. They called him Superman. With knockout power in either hand and a swagger to match, Stevenson seemed reborn. a champion built from grit and second chances. But before the glory was a past most fans never knew. In 1998, Stevenson was convicted in Canada for managing underage prostitution, assault, and gang-related violence. He was part of a criminal network that exploited young girls. He served 18 months in prison, and when he returned to the society, he rebranded as a fighter chasing redemption. The public bought it. Promoters stayed silent and broadcasters focused on his knockouts, not his victims. Even as he climbed the ranks, whispers resurfaced. Articles tried to expose the truth, but were drowned out by highlight reels and belt defenses. Then, in 2018, Stevenson was nearly killed in the ring, suffering a traumatic brain injury in his final fight, but he survived. And again, headlines praised his fighter's heart. But the real story is more complicated. Adonis Stevenson's journey wasn't just about survival, it was about forgetting. And what gets buried when a boxer becomes a brand? Rubin Hurricane Carter. In the 1960s, Rubin Hurricane Carter looked like destiny in motion. A ferocious middleweight with a shaved head and a permanent scowl, he entered the ring like a man with nothing to lose. He was fast, aggressive, and fearless. Promoters loved the story. A street-tough kid turned contender. But by 1966, the ring couldn't protect him. That year, Carter was arrested and convicted along with another man for the murder of 3 people in a New Jersey bar. The evidence was thin, the trial a mess. Still, Carter was sentenced to life in prison. America watched as some believed the conviction while others saw racism, corruption, and a rush to judgment. For 19 years, Carter fought not in the ring, but in court. Celebrities rallied behind him. Books were written. Bob Dylan sang his name. And finally, in 1985, a federal judge overturned the conviction, citing racial bias and suppressed evidence. Carter was freed and never retried. He walked free, but never fought again. Some still question his innocence, while others call him a symbol of delayed justice. Rubin Carter didn't fall like the others. He was dragged down. But in fighting back, he became something boxing rarely produces. A man whose greatest victory had nothing to do with fists. Jermaine Taylor. In the mid-2000s, Jermaine Taylor was the man who dethroned a legend. He beat Bernard Hopkins twice and became the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. Clean-cut, humble, and talented, Taylor was hailed as the new face of American boxing. He fought with precision and calm under pressure, like a man in control of every moment. But behind that control, something was unraveling. Then in 2014, the cracks burst open. Taylor was arrested for shooting his cousin during a heated argument at his Arkansas home. The bullet missed vital organs, but the damage was done. Months later, he was arrested again, this time for threatening a family at a Martin Luther King Jr. parade, reportedly pulling a gun on them in broad daylight. People were stunned. This wasn't the soft-spoken champion they remembered, but the truth was it had been building for years. After a string of brutal knockouts late in his career, Taylor showed signs of severe psychological trauma, slurred speech, and violent mood swings as friends worried. But the comeback was already underway. He tried to fight again, but he wasn't the same. Jermaine Taylor's story isn't just one of crime. It's one of mental deterioration, untreated wounds, and a sport that often forgets its fallen stars. He didn't lose his belt in the ring. He lost it piece by piece in courtrooms, mugshots, and breakdowns. These 10 men entered the ring chasing glory, but they left it haunted by violence, by trauma, and by choices no title could erase. Boxing gave them power, but it couldn't teach them peace. And in the end, the greatest fight was never against another man. It was against themselves.